Why is that the first thing I see? My god. I will never have a bald redeem, just so you know. Never. I will never have a bald redeem. And the one thing I kind of forgot. Background music. Okay. Put that right there. Okay. Honestly, by how... No. Never will I go bald. One second. Did not find... Ugh, I had it. Okay, let's see. No. Denied. No, thank you. I swear to God. Oh my God, please, not now. Please don't let my internet go. And I've decided to ignore it. Everything is running. What the actual hell? Hi, Fall. You be that one supporter. I will not blame you. Be that one supporter. At least I have YouTube already pulled up. Hold on. No. Never in my life will I be bald. Why does it always have rain? It never fails. Like, it's always rain. Oh. One second. Actually, this might be the one. Yeah, I think this is the one. I like it. But the rain ambiance half the time, I'm just like, ugh. Well, we're almost done with the ring. So I'm probably not. I'm debating if I want to continue reading the series or go to another like genre. I'm thinking about going to like another genre, and then next book will be the second one. I'll check it out later. All right. Go ahead, Fall. Um, 3 or 4 colors. Okay, yeah, that sounds like. Yes, you're making me think right now. I never really had to think about it. If I had to choose 3 or 4. Well, I know emerald green is one of them. I mean, is silver a color? Or is it a shade? But anyways, well, like emerald green, silver. Like what can I put it? Like a very specific, hold on, let me see if I can find it. A very specific blue. I think I know what it's called. Hold on. Is it this one? Okay, so okay, so I guess green, silver, peacock blue, to be specific. And there's a very and that chandelure purple flame. If I had to actually choose those colors, it's funny because there's like purple and green and silver are basically on my color palette, but like the peacock blue is just out there. Now I'm worried. I shouldn't have answered that question. I mean, it's too late now. I would have said Gardevoir green, but it's a bit too light for me. It's more of a pastel. Because I love Gardevoir. But she's more of a pastel. Okay. Hold on. Okay, I like this. I like this playlist, but I'm just like, it seems too, a bit too, I don't know, upbeat in a sense. Oh, oh god, the rain is like. It's always. Okay, I found a favorite. Okay, there we go. Should add it to the playlist. Okay, so as I said, we're almost done with this book, so I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm probably gonna switch. I'm probably gonna change books after we're done, and then the next book is gonna be the second one. Or I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I'll decide when we get there. Okay. So going back to everything, it's the day before Asakawa is destined to die. Catching everybody up. So it's the day before Asakawa is destined to die, and then Ryuji, his friend, is like dying like the day after he did. And they figured out that Sadako, that she did that. She fucking projected her thoughts for like a time being, and thus making the tape. And then we find out why her mother basically killed herself, because she was just terrible what she went through. Her mother had the power, but you know, people had to ruin a good fucking thing, as per usual. And then the man she was with, married, mind you, yeah, just, it was a whole shit show for her. So I feel bad for her, having to deal with that. Oh, 1 second. Shit. Sometimes having 2 screens is not fun because you forget. Okay. Okay, so depending if Depending where I stop at tonight, I might just finish it up tomorrow. It's a big possibility. Because it's not a lot, but... Or we might finish it tonight. Who knows? That's gonna be fun, actually. Alrighty then. Let's get to it. October 18th, Thursday. The wind was a little stronger and low white clouds raced by an otherwise clear sky. Typhoon number 21 had passed by the previous evening, grazing the Boso Peninsula to the northeast of Oshima before dissipating over the ocean. Hi, Silence. Enjoy your lurk. In its wake, it left painfully dazzling blue seas. In spite of the peaceful autumn weather, as Asakawa stood on the deck of the boat watching the waves, he felt like a condemned man on the eve of his execution. Oh, also, we found out that Sadako's mom probably didn't ever have the powers. It was this one statue that was basically thrown into the ocean from the island that she's on. And I'm thinking, then it kind of did confirm. I guess with her powers, it kind of blessed her to giving Sadako the powers as well. Who knows? Raising his eyes, he could see the gentle slope of the Izu Highlands in the distance. Today, at last, he would face his deadline. He gonna die, probably. It was now 10 in the morning. In another 12 hours, it would come, unerringly. It had been a week since he watched the video in cabin B4. It seems like ages ago. Of course, it felt long. In just 1 week, he'd experienced more terror than most people experience in a lifetime. Asakawa wasn't sure how being cooped up on Oshima all day Wednesday would hurt him. On the phone yesterday, he'd gotten excited and accused Yoshino of dragging his feet. But now that he'd thought about things calmly, he was actually very grateful to his colleague for doing so much for him. Oh, and also, I just keep remembering different shit that we found out. Okay, so we found out that Sadako used to be part of a theater troupe. And the only, surviving members or whatever, some of the surviving members, they only knew her as that creepy girl. Why? They still couldn't understand. Feel bad for her. If Asakawa had been running around chasing down leads himself, he probably would have gotten excited and missed something or gone down a blind alley. This is fine. The typhoon was on our side. If he didn't think that way, he'd never make it. Asakawa was starting to prepare his mind so that when his time came to die, he wouldn't be consumed with regrets about what he had or hadn't done. Poor guy. Hold on, I'm adjusting my mic right now. It should be good. Yes, should be good. The last clue was a 3-page printout he held in his hand. Yoshida spent half of the previous day tracking down the information before faxing it. Before South Hakone Pacific Land had been built, the land had been occupied by a rather unusual facility. Oh, we're getting somewhere. Unusual these days, that is, at the time, establishments like it were perfectly run-of-the-mill. It was a tuberculosis treatment facility, a sanatorium. Nowadays, few people lived in fear of TB, but if one read much pre-war fiction, one couldn't help but come across mention of it. It was a tuberculosis bacillus that gave Thomas Mann the impetus to write The Magic Mountain, that allowed Motojiro Kaji to sing with piercing clarity of his decay. Oh, that's just so sad. However, the discovery of streptomycin in 1944 and hydrazide in 1950 saw TB's literary catch-it, reducing its status to that of another communicable disease. In the 20s and 30s, as many as 200,000 people a year were dying from it, but the number dropped drastically after the war. Even so, the bacillus didn't become extinct. Even now, it still kills around 5,000 per year. God damn! 5,000, Jesus! In the days when TB ran rampant, clean, fresh air and a quiet, peaceful environment were deemed essential for recovery. Thus, sanatoriums were built in mountainous areas. But as progress of the medicinal treatments produced a corresponding drop in the numbers of patients, these facilities had to adjust their range of services. In other words, they had to start treating internal ailments, even performing surgeries, or else they wouldn't be able to survive financially. In the mid-1960s, the sanatorium in South Hakone was faced with just this choice. Ooh. But its situation was even more critical than most. Due to its extreme remoteness, it was just too hard to get to. With TB, once patients checked in, they usually didn't check back out again. So ease of access wasn't much of an issue. Damn! But it proved to be a fatal flaw in the plan to transform this place into a general hospital. The sanatorium ended up shutting down in 1972. Waiting in the wings was Pacific Resorts, which had been looking for a suitable location to build a golf course and resort. In 1975, Pacific Resorts bought a section of alpine land which included the old sanatorium site and immediately set about developing their golf course. Goddamn, wasted no time. Later, they built summer homes to sell, a hotel, a swimming pool, an athletic club, and tennis courts. The whole line of resort facilities. And in April of this year, 6 months ago, they'd put the finishing touches on villa log cabins. What kind of place is this then? Ryuji was supposed to be on deck, but he suddenly appeared in the seat next to Asakawa. Huh? South Hakone Pacific Land, of course. That's right, he's never been there. It's got a nice view at night. Asakawa recalled the curiously lifeless atmosphere, the tennis balls with their hollow echo under the orange lights. Where does that atmosphere come from anyway? I wonder how many people died there when there was a sanatorium. Asakawa pondered this as he remembered how the beautiful evening lights of Numazu and Mishima had spread out at his feet. Asakawa put the first page of the printout at the bottom and spread the other 2 pages out in his lap. The second page was a single diagram showing the layout of the sanatorium grounds. The third showed the building as it was today, an elegant 3-story building containing an information center and a restaurant. This was the building Asakawa had entered to ask directions to the villa log cabin. Asakawa shifted his gaze back and forth between the 2 pages. The passage of nearly 30 years was embodied in these 2 pieces of paper. If it wasn't for the fact that the access road was in the same place, he'd have no idea what on one map corresponded to what on the other. Mentally reconstructing the layout as he knew it, he looked at the second page to try and find out what had originally stood where the cabins were now. He couldn't be absolutely sure, but when he laid one page on top of the other, it certainly seemed as if there had been nothing there before. Just thick woods covering the side of a valley. He went back to the first page. It contained one more very important piece of information. Besides the story of the sanatorium's transformation into a resort, Jotaro Nagao, 57, a doctor, a GP, and pediatrician, with a private practice in Atami. For 5 years, from 1962 to 1967, Nagao had worked at the South Hakone Sanatorium. He'd been young, just past his internship. Of the doctors who'd been here at the time, the only ones still alive were Nagao and Yozo Tanaka, who was retired now. Living with his daughter and her husband in Nagasaki. All the rest, including the head of the facility, were dead. Therefore, Dr. Nagao was their only chance to find out anything about the sanatorium in South Hakone. Yozo Tanaka was already 80, and Nagasaki was much too far away. They wouldn't have time to visit him. Asakawa had pleaded desperately with Yoshino to find a living witness, and Yoshino, gritting his teeth to keep from yelling back at Asakawa, had come up with Dr. Nagao. He'd sent out only the man's name and address, but also an intriguing summary of his career. Ooh. It was probably just something Yoshino had happened to come across in his research, and he decided to append it, not actually meaning anything by it. Dr. Nagao had been at the sanatorium from 1962 to 1967, but he hadn't spent the entirety of those 5 years in the performance of his duties. For 2 weeks, a short time to be sure, but significant, he'd gone from doctor to patient and been housed in an isolation ward. What happened to him? Ooh. In the summer of 1966, while visiting an isolation ward up in the mountains, he'd carelessly allowed himself to contract the smallpox virus from a patient. Oh, that's why. Fortunately, he had been inoculated a few years previously, so it didn't turn into anything major. No visible outbreak, no reoccurrence of the fever, only minor symptoms. Get vaccinated, people. But they'd put him in isolation to keep him from affecting anyone else. What was so interesting was that this had assured Nagao a place in medical history. He had been the last smallpox patient in Japan. It wasn't necessarily something that would get him in the Guinness Book, but Yoshino seemed to have thought it was interesting. For people of Asakawa and Ryuji's generation, the word smallpox didn't even register. Valid. Ryuji, have you ever had smallpox? Idiot. Of course not. It's extinct. Extinct? Yes. Eradicated through human ingenuity. Smallpox no longer exists in the world. Buddy. The World Health Organization had made a dedicated effort to wipe out smallpox through vaccinations, and as a result, it had all but disappeared from the face of the earth by 1975. There are records of the last smallpox patient in the world, a Somalian youth who came down with it on October 26, 1977. Can a virus become extinct? Is that possible? I mean, it can. It is possible for it's not impossible, it's just fairly tedious. Asakawa didn't know much about viruses, but he couldn't shake the impression that no matter how much he tried to kill one, eventually it would mutate and find a way to survive. Exactly. It will mutate. See, viruses kind of wander around on the border between living things and non-living things. Some people even theorize that they were originally human genes. But nobody really knows where they come from or how they emerged. What's certain is that they've been intimately connected with the appearance and evolution of life. Ryuji's arms had been folded behind his head. Now he stretched them wide. His eyes glittered. Don't you find it fascinating, Asakawa? The idea that genes could escape from our cells and become another life form? Maybe all opposites were originally identical, even light and darkness. Before the Big Bang, they were living together in peace, with no contradictions. God and the devil, too. All the devil is a god who fell from grace. They're the same thing, originally. Male and female? It used to be that all living things were hermaphrodite, like worms or slugs, with both female and male sex organs. Don't you think that's the ultimate symbol of power and beauty? Ryuji laughed as he said this. I sure save a lot of time and trouble when it comes to sex, buddy. Asakawa peered at Ryuji's face to see what was so funny. There was no way that an organism with both female and male genitalia epitomized perfect beauty. Epitomized, not epitomized. Are there any other extinct viruses? Gee, if you're so interested, I suggest you look right into it when you get back to Tokyo. If I get back. Don't worry. You'll get back. At that moment, the high-speed boat that they were on exactly halfway through the voyage, linking Oshima and Ito on the Izu Peninsula. They could have made it back to Tokyo quicker by flying, but they wanted to visit Dr. Nagao in Atami, so they'd taken the sea route. Straight ahead, they could see the Ferris wheel at the Atami Korakuen. They were arriving right on time at 10:50. Asakawa descended the gangway, ran into the parking lot where they'd left the rental car. Calm down, would you? Ryuji followed at a leisurely pace. Nagao's clinic was near Kinomiya Station on the Ito line, not very far away at all. Oh, he's still practicing. Asakawa watched impatiently as Ryuji climbed into the car and then headed into Atami's maze of hills and one-way streets. Immediately after he settled himself, Ryuji said with a perfectly straight face, "Hey, I was thinking, maybe the devil's behind this whole thing after all." Asakawa was too busy looking at street signs to answer. Ryuji continued, "The devil always appears in the world in a different form. You know the bubonic plague that ravaged Europe in the second half of the 13th century? Half of the total population died. Can you believe that? Half. That's like the population of Japan being reduced to 60 million. Naturally, artists at the time likened the plague to the devil. It's like that now too. Don't we talk about AIDS as if it were a modern devil? But listen, devils never drive humanity to extinction. Why? Because if people cease to exist, so do devils. And same with viruses. If the host cell perishes, the virus can't survive, but humanity drove the smallpox virus to extinction. Really? Could we really do that? It's impossible in the modern world to even imagine the terror once inspired by smallpox, when it raged throughout the world, claiming so many lives. Such was the suffering it caused that it gave rise to innumerable religious beliefs and superstitions in Japan as well as elsewhere. People believed in God of pestilence, and it was the god of smallpox that brought the disease, though perhaps it should have been called the devil. In any case, could people really drive a god to the brink of extinction? Ryuji's question harbored a deep uncertainty. Asakawa wasn't listening to Ryuji. In some corner of his mind, he wondered why the guy was rambling on about now. But mainly he was just thinking about not making any wrong turns. Every nerve focused on getting to Dr. Nagao's clinic as fast as possible. I mean, he dies today. In a lane in front of Kinomiya Station was a small one-story house with a shingle by the door that read Nagao Clinic, Internal Medicine and Pediatrics. Asakawa and Ryuji stood in front of the door for some time. If they couldn't pull any information out of Nagao, it'd be sorry. Time's up. There was no more time to scare up new leads, but just what was there to find out from him? It was probably hoping for too much to think that he'd even remember much of anything about Sadako Yamamura from 30 years ago. They didn't even have any hard evidence that Sadako had been connected at all with the sanatorium in South Hakone. All of Nagao's colleagues at the sanatorium, except Yozo Tanaka, had died of old age. They probably could have tracked down the names of some nurses if they tried, but it was too late for that now. Asakawa looked at his watch. 11:30. Only a little time over 10 hours left until the deadline, and here he was, hesitating to open the door. What are you waiting for? Go on in. Ryuji gave him a shove. Of course, he could understand why Asakawa was hesitating, even though he'd been in such a hurry to get here. He was scared. No doubt he was afraid of seeing his last hope dashed, his last chance to survive eliminated. Ryuji stepped in front of him and opened the door. A couch big enough for 3 people stood along one wall of the small waiting room. Conveniently, there was no patients waiting. Ryuji bent over the little receptionist window and spoke to the fat middle-aged nurse behind it. Excuse me, we'd like to see the doctor. Without lifting her eyes from her magazine, the nurse lazily replied, would you like to make an appointment? No, that's not it. There's something we'd like to ask him about. She closed her magazine, looked up, and put on her glasses. May I ask what this regards to? Like I said, we'd just like to ask him a few questions. Irritated, Asakawa peeked out from behind Ryuji's back and asked, is the doctor in? The nurse touched the rim of her glasses with both hands and studied the 2 men. What is this about? She asked overbearingly. Both Ryuji and Asakawa stood up straight. Ryuji said, loudly enough to be heard, with the receptionist like her, it's no wonder there's no patients. Buddy. Excuse me? She said. Asakawa hung his head. It wouldn't do to get her angry, but just then the door of the examination room opened and Nagao appeared, dressed in a white lab coat. Although he was completely bald, Nagao looked rather younger than his 57 years. He frowned and fixed a suspicious gaze at the two men in his entryway. Asakawa and Ryuji both turned at the sound of Nagao's voice. And the instant they saw his face, they gasped simultaneously. And we thought this guy might be able to tell us something about Sadako? No kidding. As if it were an electric current coursing through his brain, Asakawa found himself replaying the final scene of the video in his head. The sweating, panting face of a man seen from close up, eyes bloodshot. Oh, it's him! Oh, they found the guy in the tape! Bro. A gaping wound in his exposed shoulder from which blood ran, dripping into the viewer's eyes, clouding them over. A tremendous pressure on the viewer's chest, murderous intent in the man's face, and that face was exactly what they saw now. Dr. Nagao. He was older now, but there was no way of mistaking him. Asakawa and Ryuji exchanged glances. Then Ryuji pointed at the doctor and began to laugh. Now this is why games are interesting. Who would have thought it? Imagine running into you here. Nagao was obviously displeased at the way these two strange men had reacted to seeing him. He raised his voice. Who are you? Unfazed, Ryuji walked right up to him and grabbed him by the lapels. Nagao was several centimeters taller than Ryuji. Ryuji flexed his powerful arms and pulled the doctor's ear to his mouth, and then spoke in a gentle voice that had belied his strength. So tell me, pal, what was it you did to Sadako Yamamura 30 years ago at the South Hakone Sanatorium? Oh, shit! It took a few seconds for the words to sink into the doctor's brain. Nagao's eyes darted around nervously as he searched his memories. Then they came to him, scenes of a time he'd never been able to forget. His knees sagged, all the strength seemed to go out of his body. Just as he was about to faint, Ryuji steadied him and leaned him back against the wall. Nagao wasn't shocked by the memories themselves. Rather, it was the fact that the man before him, who may or may not have been 30 years old, knew about what had happened. Indescribably dread pierced his soul. Oh, what did he do? Doctor! Exclaimed the nurse, Miss Fujimura. I think it's about time this place closed for lunch, Ryuji said, signaling to Asakawa with his eyes. Asakawa closed the curtain over the entryway so that no patients could enter. Doctor! Nurse Fujimura didn't know how to handle the situation. She waited, dumbly for Nagao to instruct her. Nagao somehow pulled himself together a little and thought about what to do next. Thinking that, above all, he couldn't let this nosy woman find out about what had happened, he assumed a calm expression. Nurse Fujimura, you can take your break now. Run along now and get something to eat. But doctor... Just do as I say. There's no need to worry about me. First, two strange men come in and whisper something in the doctor's ear, and the next thing she knew, the doctor was collapsing. She didn't know what to make of all this, so she just stood there for a few moments. Finally, the doctor shouted, "Go now!" She practically flew out the front door. A valid reaction from her. Now then, let's hear what you have to say for yourself. Ryuji went into the examination room. Nagao followed after, looking like the patient who just informed he had cancer. Ooh, he did something. I'll warn you before we start, you mustn't lie to us. I and this gentleman here know everything. You've seen it with our very eyes. Ryuji pointed first at Asakawa and then his own eyes. What the? Seen? Impossible. The bushes were too thick. There was nobody around.
Not to mention, these two are too young. They would have only been... I understand why you might be reluctant to believe me, but we both know your face. All too well. Suddenly, Ryuji's tone changed. In that case, why don't I tell you one of your distinguishable features? You got a scar on your right shoulder, haven't you? Nagao's eyes grew wide with astonishment, and his jaw started to quiver. After a pregnant pause, Ryuji said, "Now, shall I tell you why you have the scar on your shoulder?" Ryuji leaned over and stretched his neck until his lips were almost touching Nagao's shoulder. "Sadako Yamamura bit you, didn't she? Just like this." Ryuji opened his mouth and pretended to bite through the white cloth. Nagao's trembling grew worse, and he desperately tried to say something, but his mouth wouldn't work. He couldn't form words. Whoa. Oh my god. Clocking him. I think you get my point. Now, we're not going to repeat anything you tell us, we promise. All we want to know is everything that happened to Sadako. Not that he was in any condition to think at all, but Nagao didn't think Ryuji's words quite added up. If they'd already seen everything, why did they need to hear anything from the doctor's mouth? But wait. The whole idea that they saw anything is silly. They couldn't have seen anything. They probably weren't even born yet. So what's going on here? What do they think they've seen? The more he thought about it, the less sense it made, until his head felt like it was ready to burst. Ryuji chuckled and looked at Asakawa. The man's eye said it all. Frighten him like this and he'll come clean. He'll tell us anything. And indeed, Nagao began to talk. He himself was puzzled as to why he remembered everything so clearly. And as he spoke, every sensory organ in his body began to recall the excitement of the day. The passion, the heat, the touch, the glossy shine of her skin, the song of the locusts, the mingled smells of sweat and grass in the old well. He had Uh-oh. I don't even know what caused it. Maybe the fever and headache robbed me of my ordinary good judgment. Those were the early symptoms of smallpox, which meant I had already passed through the incubation period, but I didn't dream that I had caught the disease myself. Fortunately, I managed not to infect anyone else in the sanatorium. To this day, I'm haunted by the thought of what would have happened if the tuberculosis patients had been attacked by smallpox as well. That would have been just a nail in the coffin for them. That would suck. That day was a hot one. I've been examining the tomograms of a newly admitted patient, and I had found a hole the size of a 1 yen coin in one of his lungs. I told him to resign himself to spending a year with us, and then I'd give him a copy of the diagnosis to give his company. Then I couldn't take it anymore. I just had to go outside. But even breathing the fresh mountain air didn't make the pain in my head go away. So I went down to the stone steps beside the ward, thinking to take shelter in the shade of the garden. There I noticed a young woman leaning against a tree trunk, gazing at the world down below. She wasn't one of our patients. She was the daughter of a patient who'd been there long before I arrived. A man named Heihachiro Ikuma, a former assistant professor at Taido University. Brother! Oh! I might have to read a second one after this, though. Holy shit. Her name was Sadako Yamamura. I remember the name well. Her family name was different from her father's. For about a month, she had been making frequent visits to the sanatorium, but she didn't spend much time with her father, nor would she ask the doctors much about his condition. All I could assume was that she was there to enjoy the alpine scenery. I sat down next to her and smiled at her, asked her how her father was doing. But she didn't look like she even wanted to know about his illness. On the other hand, it was clear that she knew he didn't have much longer. I could tell by the way she spoke. She knew the day her father was going to die, with more certainty than any doctor's educated guess. Oh? Sitting there beside her like that, talking to her about her life and her family, I suddenly became aware that my headache, so unbearable a little while ago, had retreated.
What?
In its place appeared a fever accompanied by an odd feeling of excitement. I felt vitality well up within me, as if the temperature in my blood had been raised. I gazed at her face.
Oh, he did not. Oh, no.
It felt like I always felt, a sense of wonder that a woman with such perfect features should exist in the world. I'm not exactly sure what defines beauty, but I know that Dr. Tanaka, who was 20 years older than me, used to say that same thing. That he'd never seen anyone more beautiful than Sadako Yamamura. My breath was choked with fever, but somehow I controlled it enough to softly put a hand on her shoulder and say to her, "Oh, let's go somewhere cooler to talk in the shade."
She suspected nothing. Brother! Oh no, you deserve that. Oh, you deserve to die. She should have got your ass.
She nodded once and started to get to her feet, and as she stood up and bent over, I saw, down the front of her white blouse, her perfectly formed little breasts. They were so white that my whole mind was suddenly dyed milky white, and it was as if my reason was taken from me in the shock. She paid no attention to my agitation, but just brushed the dust from her long skirt. Her gestures seemed so innocent and adorable.
Brother!
We strolled on and on through the lush forest, surrounded by the droning of the cicadas. I hadn't decided on any particular destination. My feet kept heading in a certain direction. Sweat ran down my back. I took off my shirt, leaving only my undershirt. We followed an animal track until it opened up into the side of the valley, where there stood a dilapidated old house. It had probably been at least 10 years since anyone had lived there. The walls were rotting and the roof looked like it could collapse at any moment. There was a well on the other side of the house, and when she saw it, she ran towards it, saying, "Oh, I'm so thirsty." She bent over to look in. Even from the outside, it was obvious that the well wasn't used anymore. I ran to the well too, but not to look inside. What I wanted to see was Sadako's chest as she bent over again. I placed both hands on the lip of the well and got a close look. I could feel cold, damp air rising from the dark depths of the earth to caress my face, but it couldn't take away the burning urge I felt.
That's the well. Oh, he killed her.
I didn't know where the urge came from. I think now that the smallpox fever had taken away my mechanism of control, I swear to you, I had never experienced a sensual temptation before in my life. I found myself reaching out to touch that gentle swelling. She looked up in shock.
I would too!
Something snapped inside me. My memories of what happened next are hazy. All I can recall are fragmentary scenes.
He did not.
I found myself pressing Sadako to the ground. I pulled her blouse up over her breast, and then...
Oh, poor girl. He deserved to die.
My memory skips to her resisting, violently and then biting my shoulder. It was intense pain that brought me back to my senses. I saw the blood flowing from my shoulder drip onto her face. Blood dripped into her eyes, and she shook her head in revulsion. I adjusted my body to the rhythmic motion. What did my face look like then? What did she see when she looked at me? The face of a beast, I'm sure. That's what I was thinking as I finished. When it was over, she fixed me with an implacable gaze. Still lying on her back, she raised her knees and skillfully used her elbows to scoot backwards. I looked at her body again. I thought my eyes had deceived me. Her wrinkled gray skirt had bunched up around her waist, and she made no move to cover her breasts as she backed up. A ray of sunlight fell on the point where her thighs converged. Clearly illuminating a small blackish lump. I raised my eyes to her chest, beautifully shaped breast. Then I looked down again. Within her... Ew. Her mountain... Ew, the pair of...
Hold up! Hold the fucking phone. What? Hold on, I read a bit ahead. Oh my god. Oh my god. I wish they kept this in them. Okay, no. Okay, I would probably watch this movie. 100%, I would watch this movie. Not gonna lie. It's more of a thriller to me than a horror novel at this point. I guess there is some horror aspects to it, like dying and shit like that. But oh my fucking god. Okay. Oh my god. Okay. They looked down again. Within her pubic mound, covered with hair, was a pair of perfectly developed testicles. Brother! Oh my god. Had I not been a doctor, I probably would have been shocked silly, but I knew of cases of this from photos and medical texts. Testicular feminization syndrome is an extremely rare syndrome. I never thought I'd see one outside of a textbook, much less in a situation such as that. Testicular feminization is a type of male pseudohermaphroditism. Externally, the person seems completely female, having breasts and a vagina and a vag, but usually not a uterus. Chromosomally, the person is XY, however, male. And for some reason, people with this condition are all beautiful. Okay, that's threw me for a fucking loop. Oh my god. And nobody else is here to witness me crashing the fuck out right now with this. Holy shit. Well, whoever else is here, goddamn. Oh my god. Oh no, wait, he probably fucking killed her.
Sadako was still staring at me. I was probably the first person outside her family to discover the secret of her body. Needless to say, she had been a virgin up until a few minutes previous. It had been a necessary trial if she were to go on living as a woman. I was trying to rationalize my actions, then suddenly words flew into my head.
I'll kill you. Bye, Calamity. I wish you well. Bye, Calamity. You'll be alright. I believe in you. Hold on, I'm live tweeting this shit because, oh my god.
Literally.
Okay, anyways. Oh my god. Damn. I need. Oh my god. Bro, she died because this fucking dude. Oh my god. Fuck this guy in particular. Fuck him.
As I reeled from the strength of will behind the words, I instantaneously intuited that her telepathic message was no lie.
Oh, that was her that was saying that to him. Oh, kill him. I'm like, no, shit, he's still alive, so she didn't get to him. Damn, I hope he fucking dies.
There was no room within it for even a sliver of doubt. My body accepted it as certainty. She'd do me if I didn't do her first.
Buddy, you have the audacity.
My body instincts for self-preservation gave me an order. I climbed back on top of her, placed both of my hands on her slender neck, and pressed with my full weight. To my surprise, there was less resistance this time. She narrowed her eyes with pleasure and relaxed her body, almost as if she wanted to die.
Oh, poor girl. Sadako.
I didn't wait to see if she stopped breathing. I picked her up and went to the...
We went to the well? Oh, brother!
I think my actions were still beyond my will at this point. In other words, I didn't pick her up intending to drop her into the well. But rather, the moment I picked her up, the round black mouth of the well caught my eye, and I put it in my mind to do it. Everything felt as if it were working out perfectly for me. Or rather, I felt as if I was being moved by the will beyond my own. I had a general idea of what was going to happen next. I could hear a voice in the back of my head saying this was all a dream. The well was dark, and from where I stood at the top, I couldn't see the bottom very well. From the smell of soil wafting up, it seemed that there was a shallow accumulation of water at the bottom. I let go. Sadako's body slid down the side of the well into the earth, hitting the bottom with a splash. I stared into the well until my eyes got used to the dark, but I still couldn't see her curled up down there. Even so, I couldn't shake my uneasiness. I flung rocks and dirt into the well, trying to hide her body forever. I threw in armfuls of dirt and 5 or 6 flat-sized rocks before I just couldn't do anymore.
Oh my god, he's a piece of shit.
The rocks hit her body, making a dull thud at the bottom of the well and stimulating my imagination. When I thought of that sickly, beautiful body being broken by those stones, I couldn't go through with it. I know that doesn't make any sense. On the one hand, I desired the destruction of her body, but on the other hand, I didn't want her body to be marred. Well, make up your fucking mind. Pick a struggle. When Nagao finished speaking, Asakawa handed him the map of South Hakone's Pacific land. Where on this map would that well be? Asakawa asked, urgently. It took Nagao a few moments to understand what he was being shown, but after he was told that what had once been a sanatorium was now a restaurant, he seemed to regain his orientation. I think it was right about here, he said, pointing to a point on the map. No doubt about it. That's where the villa log cabin... The cabin's built above the well! Asakawa said, rising. Let's go. But Ryuji was calm. Don't go rushing off just yet. We still have some things we need to talk to ask this whole fart. Now, this syndrome you mentioned. Testicular feminization syndrome. Can a woman with this bear children? Nagao shook his head. No, she can't. One other thing. When you raped Sadako Yamamura, you had already contracted smallpox, right? Nagao nodded. In which case, the last person in Japan to be infected with smallpox was Sadako Yamamura. No. It was certain that just before her death, Sadako Yamamura's body had been invaded by the smallpox virus, but she had died immediately afterwards. If its host perishes, a virus can't go on living. Nagao didn't know how to answer and looked down, avoiding Ryuji's gaze. He only gave a vague reply. Hey, what are you doing? We've got to get going. Asakawa was in the doorway, urging Ryuji to hurry. Shit. Hope you're happy, said Ryuji, flicking the tip of the doctor's nose with his index finger before following Asakawa. Oh, shit. Man! Oh my god. He couldn't explain it logically, but from experience reading novels and watching trashy TV shows, he felt like he had a good idea of the kind of plot device called for now, based on the way the story had unfolded. There was a certain tempo to the unfolding. They hadn't been searching for Sadako's hiding place, but in the blink of an eye, they'd stumbled upon the tragedy that had befallen her and the spot where she was buried. So when Ryuji told him to stop in front of the large hardware store, Asakawa was relieved. He's thinking the same thing I am. Asakawa still couldn't imagine what a horrible task this would be. Unless it had been completely buried, finding the old well in the vicinity of Villa Log Cabin shouldn't be too difficult. And once they found it, it should be easy to bring up Sadako's remains. It all sounded pretty simple, and he wanted to think it would be. It was 1 in the afternoon. The midday sun reflected brilliantly from the hilly streets in this hot spring resort town. The brightness and the neighborhood's laid-back weekday mood clouded his imagination. It didn't occur to him that even if we're only 4 or 5 meters deep, the bottom of a well was bound to be an entirely different world from the well-lit ground above. You're damn right it is! Nishizaki Hardware. Asakawa saw the sign and braked. There were stepladders and lawnmowers lined up in the front of the store. They should be able to get everything they needed here. I'll let you do the shopping, Asakawa said, running to a nearby phone booth. He paused before entering it to take a phone card from his wallet. Hey, we don't have time to waste on phone calls. But Asakawa wasn't listening. Grumbling, Ryuji went into the store and grabbed rope, a bucket, a shovel, a pulley block, and a high-powered flashlight. Asakawa was desperate. This might be his last chance to hear their voices. He knew full well how little time he had to waste. He only had 9 hours left until his deadline. He slipped his card into the phone and dialed the number of his wife's parents' house in Ashikaga. His father-in-law answered. Hello, it's Asakawa. Could you call Shizu and Yoko to the phone? He knew he was being rude, skipping the customary exchange of pleasantries, but he didn't have time to worry about his father-in-law's feelings. That's right. The man started to say something, but they seemed to sense urgency in the situation and immediately summoned his daughter and granddaughter. Asakawa was extremely glad his mother-in-law hadn't been the one to answer. He never had gotten a word in edgewise then. Hello? Shizu, is that you? Hearing her voice, he missed her already. Where are you? Atami, how's everything there? Oh, about the same. Yoko's having a great time with Grandma and Grandpa. Is she there? He could hear her voice. No words, just sounds, as she struggled to climb up her mother's lap to get to her father. Yoko, it's Daddy. Shizu put the receiver to Yoko's ear. No, Yoko. He could be... She calls him Dada. Oh my god, Yoko. Your mother fucking screwed you over for a bit. He could barely hear the words. If words they were. They were all but drowned out by the sound of her breathing in the phone or rubbing the mouthpiece against her cheek. Oh my god. But these noises only made him feel that much closer to her. He was overcome with the desire to leave all this behind him and hug her. Yoko, you right there, okay? Daddy's coming soon to get you in the vroom vroom. Really? When are you getting here? She's always taken the phone without him realizing it. On Sunday, right? I'll be renting a car and driving up, so let's all take a drive into the mountains. To Nikko or something. Really? Nikko isn't that great? Daddy's going to take us for a drive in a car on Sunday. He felt his ears burning. Was he really in a position to make that kind of promise? A doctor was never supposed to say anything to give his patients false hope. He was supposed to do things to minimize the eventual shock as much as possible. It sounds like you've got this thing you're working on straightened out. Well, it's coming along. You promised me that when all this is over, you tell me the whole thing from the beginning. He had promised that, in exchange for her not asking any questions right now. He'd said he'd tell her all about it once it was taken care of. His wife had kept her end of the bargain. Hey, how long are you going to keep talking? Ryuji said from behind him. Asakawa turned around. Ryuji had the trunk open and was loading his purchases into the car. I'll call again. I might not be able to tonight, though. Asakawa placed his hand on the hook. If he pushed, the connection would be broken. Oh, it's a man who just... In terms of musical terms, he's just a man just trying to get home. Push the connection will be broken. He didn't even know why he called. Was it just to hear their voices, or did he have something more important to them? But he knew that even if he'd been able to talk to her for an hour, when it came time to hang up, he'd still feel constrained. As if he'd only said half of what he wanted to say. It'd just be the same thing. He pressed down on the hook and then let go. In any case, everything would be clear tonight at 10. Tonight at 10. Driving up the daytime like this, South Hakone Pacific Land felt like a typical mountain resort. The creepy mood he'd felt last time he came was hidden by the sunlight. Even the sound of bouncing tennis balls was normal, not sluggish or sonorous like before, but crisp and light. They could see Mount Fuji, hazy and white, and below them the distant scattered flashes of sun from greenhouse roofs. It was a weekday afternoon, and villa log cabins appeared deserted. It seemed that the only time the rental units were fully occupied was weekends and the summer vacation season. B4 was vacant today too. Leaving Ryuji to check in, Asakawa unloaded the car and changed into lighter clothes. He looked carefully around the room. A week ago this evening, Asakawa had fled in fear from the haunted house. He remembered running into the bathroom to throw up, feeling that he was about to piss himself. He could even remember, quite vividly, the graffiti he'd seen on the bathroom wall when he knelt down in front of the toilet. Now he opened the bathroom door. The same graffiti in the same place. It was just after 2. They went out onto the balcony and ate the box lunches they'd bought on the way while gazing over the grassy meadow surrounding the cabins. The fretful mood that had shadowed them here from Nagao's clinic subsided a bit. Even amidst the worst panic, there was still scattered moments like this, when time flowed leisurely by. Even when trying to finish a story by an impending deadline, Asakawa would sometimes find himself aimlessly watching coffee drop from the spout of the coffee maker, and later he'd reflected on how elegantly he'd wasted precious time. "Eat up, we'll need our strength," said Ryuji. He'd brought 2 lunches just for himself. Asakawa, meanwhile, didn't seem to have much appetite. From time to time, he'd rest his chopsticks and look back inside the cabin. Suddenly, he spoke as if it had just occurred to him. "Maybe we better get this straight. What exactly are we doing here?" "We're going to look for Sadako, of course." "And what are we going to do once we found her?" "Take her back to Sashikiji and lay her to rest." "So that's the charm. You're saying that's what she wants?"
She probably wants the man dead. Just throwing that out there. Just throwing that out there.
Ryuji chewed loudly for a while on a big mouthful of rice, staring straight ahead, unfocused. Asakawa could tell from the look on his face that Ryuji wasn't entirely convinced either. Asakawa was scared. It was his last chance, and he wanted some sort of assurance that they were doing the right thing. There were to be no do-overs.
Valid.
"There's nothing else we can do now," said Ryuji, tossing away his empty lunchbox. "What about this possibility? Maybe she wants us to clear away her resentment toward the person who killed her."
Valid.
"You mean Jotaro Nagao? You mean if we exposed him, Sadako would be appeased?" Asakawa looked deep into Ryuji's eyes, trying to figure out what he really thought. If they dug up the remains and laid them to rest and it still didn't save Asakawa's life, maybe Ryuji was planning to kill Dr. Nagao. He should have really done it already, not gonna lie. Maybe he was using Asakawa as a test case, trying to save his own skin. I mean, it's not entirely impossible. "Come on, don't be stupid," said Ryuji with a laugh. "First of all, if Nagao had really incurred Sadako's resentment, he'd already be dead." "That is also true." "True, she definitely had that kind of power. So why did she let herself be killed by him? I can't say, but look, she was surrounded by the deaths of people close to her. She knew nothing but frustration, even disappearing from the theater company like that was essentially a frustration of her goals, right? Then she visits her father at the sanatorium and finds out he's near death. A person who's given up on the world harbors no resentment toward the person who takes her out of it. Is that what you're saying?" "Not exactly. Rather, I think it's possible that Sadako herself caused the impulse in old man Nagao. In other words, maybe she killed herself, but borrowing Nagao's hands to do it."
Wow.
She probably did. Her mother had thrown herself into a volcano. Her father was dying of tuberculosis. Her own dream of becoming an actress had been shattered, and then there was her congenital handicap. She had any number of reasons to commit suicide.
Oh, poor girl. Oh my god.
And there were things that she did that just didn't add up unless one assumed she'd killed herself. Yoshino's report had mentioned Shigemori, founder of theater group Soaring. He'd gotten drunk and dropped in on Sadako and died the next day of cardiac paralysis. It was almost certain that Sadako had killed him using some abnormal ability of hers. She had that kind of power. She could easily kill a man or two without leaving any evidence. So why was Nagao still alive? It made no sense, unless one decided that she must have guided his will in order to kill herself. Valid. Well, okay, let's say it was suicide. But why did she have to be raped before she died? And don't tell me it's because she didn't want to die a virgin. Asakawa had hit the nail on the head, and as a result, Ryuji was a loss for answer. That was exactly what he was going to say. Is that really so stupid? Huh? Is it really so foolish to not want to die a virgin? Ryuji pressed his point with a desperate earnestness. If it were me, if by some chance it were me, that's how I'd feel. I wouldn't want to die a virgin. Buddy. This wasn't like Ryuji, Asakawa felt. Asakawa couldn't explain it logically, but neither the words nor the facial expressions were like Ryuji at all. Are you serious? Men and women are different, especially in the case of Sadako Yamamura. Just kidding. Sadako didn't want to be raped. Of course she didn't. I mean, who would want a thing like that to happen to oneself? Plus, she bit Nagao's shoulder down to the bone. It was only after it had happened that the thought of dying occurred to her, and without even considering it, guided Nagao in that direction. I think that's probably what happened.
Really? The dude who had done that to 3 people is saying that? God, I hate him so fucking much. Ryuji is a dickhead, and I hate him.
But then, wouldn't you still expect her to have a lingering resentment towards Nagao? Asakawa still wasn't convinced. But aren't you forgetting? We need to imagine the spear tip of her resentment being pointed, not at any one individual, but at society in general. Compared to that, her hatred of Nagao was as insignificant as a fart in a windstorm.
Why were these comparisons? Oh my god.
If hatred towards society in general was what incorporated into that video, then what was the charm? What could it be? The phrase indiscriminate attack came into Asakawa's mind before Ryuji's thick voice interrupted his thoughts. Enough already. If we have time to think about crap like this, we should be spending it trying to find Sadako. She's the one who'll solve every riddle. Ryuji drank the last of his oolong tea and then stood up and tossed the empty can out towards the valley floor. Ugh, God, I hate him so fucking much. He stood on the great hillside, looking around at the tall grass. Ryuji handed Asakawa a sickle and pointed with his chin to the slope on the left of B4. He wanted him to cut away the tangles of grass and examine the contours of the ground there. Asakawa bent down, dropped his knee, and began to swing the sickle in an arc parallel to the ground. Grass began to fall. 30 years before, a dilapidated house had stood there, with a well in its front yard. Asakawa stood up again. He walked around again, wondering where he'd built his dwellings if it were to live here. He'd probably chose a site with a nice view. There was no other reason to build a house up here. Where was the best view? Eyes trained in the greenhouse roofs shining far below, Asakawa walked around a bit, paying attention to the shifting perspective. The view didn't seem to change much no matter where he went. But he thought that if you were building a house, it would be easier to build it where cabin A4 stood than where B4 was. When he bent down to the ground and looked, he realized that was the only level patch of ground. He crawled around in the space between A4 and B4, cutting the grass and feeling the earth with his hands. He had no memory of ever drawing water from a well. He realized that he'd never seen a real well. He had no idea what one really looked like, especially one in a mountainous area such as this. Was there really groundwater here? But then, a few hundred meters east along the floor of the valley, there was a patch of marsh, surrounded by tall trees. Asakawa's thoughts weren't coming together. What was he supposed to concentrate on during a task such as this? No idea. He felt the blood rush to his head. He looked at his watch. Almost 3 o'clock. 7 hours left. Would all this effort get them any closer to meeting the deadline? Thoughts set his mind into further disarray. His image of the well was hazy. What could remain to mark the site of an old well? A bunch of stones piled up in a circle? What if they'd collapsed and fallen into the earth? No way. They'd never make it in time. He looked at his watch again. Exactly 3 now. He just drunk 500 milliliters of oolong tea on the balcony. But already his throat was dry again. Voices echoed in his head. Look for a bulge in the earth. Look for rocks. He jabbed the shovel into the exposed dirt. Time and blood assaulted his brain. His nerves were shot, but he didn't feel fatigued. Why was time flowing so differently now that it had on the balcony when they were eating lunch? Why had he started to panic so much the minute he'd set to work? Was this the right thing to do, really? Weren't there a lot of other things he should be doing? He dug a cave once as a child. He must have been in the 4th or 5th grade. He laughed weakly as he recalled the episode. What in the world are you doing? At the sound of Ryuji's voice, Asakawa's head jerked up. What have you been up to, crawling around over here? We've got to search a wider area. Asakawa gaped up at Ryuji. Ryuji had the sun at his back. His face was shadowy. Drops of sweat from his dark face fell to the grass by his feet. What was I up to? A little hole had been dug in the ground right in front of him. Asakawa had dug it. You digging a pit or something? She's messing with him. She's fucking with his brain. That's what she's doing. Oh, Sadako. Girl. Ryuji sighed. Asakawa frowned and moved to look at his watch. And stop looking at your fucking watch! Ryuji slapped his hand away. Brother! He glared at Asakawa for a little while, then sighed again. He squatted and whispered calmly, Maybe you ought to take a break. No time. I'm telling you, you need to get a hold of yourself. Panicking won't get you anywhere. Asakawa was crouching too, and Ryuji poked him lightly in the chest. Asakawa lost his balance and fell on over backwards, feet in the air. That's it. Lie down just like that, like a baby. Asakawa squirmed, trying to get to his feet. Don't move. Lie down. Don't waste your strength. Ryuji stepped on Asakawa's chest until he stopped struggling. Asakawa closed his eyes and gave up resisting. The weight of Ryuji's foot was seeded into the distance. When he gently opened his eyes again, Ryuji was moving his short, powerful legs, crossing over into the shade of B4's balcony. His gait was eloquent. He'd had an inspiration as to where they could find the well, and his sense of desperation had faded. After Ryuji left, Asakawa lay still for a while. Flat on his back, spread eagle, he gazed up at the sky. The sun was bright. How weak his spirit was compared to Ryuji's. Disgusting. He regulated his breathing and tried to think coolly. He wasn't confident he could keep himself together as the next 7 hours ticked away.
Hi, Duke. How are you? I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm getting fucking flabbergasted by this book. Just really flabbergasted. Yeah, spread eagle. And dude's dying in 7 hours. To catch you up to speed on the book I'm reading Ring. Not gonna lie, yeah, I feel that. So I'm reading Ring, the novel that inspired the horror movie. And oh my god, I wish they adapted the book and not just make their own fucking franchise. Cause goddamn. Alright, now where was I? Boom. Okay, He just followed Ryuji's order. That be best.
Lose himself, place himself under the sway of someone with an unyielding spirit. Losing yourself. You'll even be able to escape the terror then. You're going to be buried in the earth. You'll become one with nature. As it was answer to his wish, he suddenly overcome by drowsiness and began to lose consciousness. At the very threshold of sleep, in the midst of a daydream about lifting Yoko high in the air, he remembered once again that episode from his grade school days. There was a municipal sports grounds on the outskirts of the town where he'd grown up. There was a cliff at its edge, and at the foot of the cliff was a swamp with crayfish in it. When he was a schoolboy, Asakawa often went there with his buddies to catch crayfish. On that particular day, the sun shining on the exposed red earth of the cliff next to the swamp was like a challenge. He was tired of sitting there holding his fishing pole anyway, so he went over to where the sun was shining on the cliff and began to dig a hole in its steep face.
What?
The dirt was soft clay and it crumbled away at his feet when he thrust in an old piece of board he'd found. Before long, his friends joined him. There had been 3 of them, he seemed to recall, or maybe 4. Just the perfect number for digging a cave. Any more, they would have been bumping heads. Any fewer, and it would have been too much work for each of them. After an hour of digging, they made a hole just the right size for one of them to crawl into. They kept going. They'd originally been on their way home from school, and soon one of his friends said he had to be getting home. Only Asakawa, whose idea had been in the first place, kept at it silently. And by the time the sun set, the cave had grown large enough for all the boys who were left to squeeze into. Asakawa had hugged his knees. He and his friends giggled at each other. Curled up in the red clay like that, they felt like the Stone Age people at Mikabe, whose remains they'd just learned about in social studies. However, after a little while, the entrance to the hole was blocked by a lady's face. The setting sun was at her back, so her face in the shadows, and they couldn't make out her expression, but they realized it was 50-ish housewives from the neighborhood. What are you boys doing digging a hole in here? It'd be pretty disgusting if you got buried alive in there. Who the fuck says that to kids? The lady said, peering into the cave. Asakawa and the 2 other boys exchanged glances. Young though they were, they still noticed something odd about her warning. Not, cut it out, that's dangerous. But, cut it out, because if you get buried alive in there and died, it would be disgusting to people in the neighborhood, such as me. Oh, she's a Karen. She was cautioning them purely for her own good. Asakawa and his friends began to giggle again. The lady's face blocked the entrance like a figure in the shadow play. Yudi's face gradually superimposed itself over the lady's. Now you're a bit too relaxed. Imagine being able to go night-night in a place like this. Hey, you jerk, what are you giggling at? Ryuji woke him up. The sun was nearing the western horizon, and darkness was fast approaching. Ryuji's face and figure against the weakening sunlight were even blacker than before. Come over here a minute. Ryuji pulled Asakawa to his feet, and then suddenly crawled back under the balcony of B4. Asakawa followed. Under the balcony, one of the boards between the supporting pillars had been parted back way. Ryuji stuck his hand in behind the board and pulled it out with all his might. With a loud snap, the board broke in half diagonally. The decor inside the cabin was modern, but these boards were flimsy. You could break them by hand. The builders had thoroughly skimped on that part so you couldn't see. Ryuji poked a flashlight inside and shined it around the cabin. He nodded as if to say, "Come look at this." Asakawa fixed his gaze at the gap in the wall and looked inside. The flashlight beam was trained on the black protrusion over by the west side. As he stared at it, he noticed that the side seemed to have an uneven texture, like a pile of rocks. The top was covered with a concrete lid. Blades of grass poked out of the cracks in the concrete between the stones. Asakawa immediately realized what was directly overhead. The living room of the cabin, and directly over the round rim of the well, were the television and VCR. A week ago, where he'd watched the video, Sadako Yamamura had been this close, hiding, watching what went on above. Ryuji pulled off more boards until there was an opening large enough for a man to pass through. They both ducked through the hole in the wall and crawled to the rim of the well. The cabin was built on a grade, and they entered from the downhill side. So the further they went, the lower the floorboards got, creating a sense of something pressing down on them. Even though there should be plenty of air in the dark crawl space, Asakawa began to feel it hard to breathe. The soil here was clammier than outside. Asakawa knew full well what they must do now. He knew, but he felt no fear yet. He felt claustrophobic just from the floorboards over his head. But maybe he'd have to go down to the bottom of the well, into a place ruled by an even deeper darkness. Not maybe. To pull Sadako out, they'd almost certainly have to descend into the well. "Give me a hand here," said Ryuji. He had grabbed a piece of rebar poking out from the crack in the concrete lid and was trying to pull the lid onto the downslope. But the ceiling was too low.
Honestly, I might be finishing this shit tonight. I don't care.
And he couldn't even get it much leverage. Even someone like Ryuji, who could bench 120 kilos, was down to half strength if he didn't have the right footing. Asakawa went around the well until he was uphill from it and lay down on his back. He pulled both hands on a support column to brace himself and then pushed against the lid with his feet. There was an ugly sound of concrete scraped against stone. Asakawa and Ryuji began to chant in order to synchronize their efforts. The lid moved. How many years had it been since the well's face was exposed? Had the well been capped when Villa Log Cabin was built? Or when Pacific Land was established? Or when the sanatorium closed? They could only guess, based on the strength of the seal between the concrete and the stones, and the almost human screech as the lid was torn away. Probably more than just 6 months or a year, but no longer than 25 years. In any case, the well had now started to open its mouth. Ryuji stuck the blade of the shovel into the space they'd made so far and pushed. Okay, when I give the signal, I want you to lean into the handle. Asakawa turned around. Ready? 1, 2, 3, push! As Asakawa leaned the makeshift lever, Ryuji pushed on the side of the cap with both hands. With an agonizing shriek, the lid fell to the ground. The lip of the well was faintly damp. Asakawa and Ryuji picked up their flashlights, placed their other hands on the wet rim, and pulled themselves up. Before shining light into the well, they moved their heads and shoulders into the roughly 50-centimeter gap between the top of the well and the floor above. A putrid smell arose in the cold air. The space inside the well was so dense that they could feel as if they let go of their hands, they'd be sucked in. She was here, all right. The woman with extraordinary supernatural powers, with testicular feminization syndrome. Woman wasn't even the right word. The biological distance between male and female depended on the construct of the gonads. No matter how beautifully feminine the body, if those gonads were in the form of testes, it was a male. Asakawa didn't know whether he should consider Sadako Yamamura a man or a woman. Since her parents had named her Sadako, it seemed they had tended to raise her as a woman. This morning, on the boat to Atami, Ryuji had said, "Don't you think a person with both male and female genitals is the ultimate symbol of power and beauty?" Come to think of it, Asakawa had once seen something in an art book that had made him doubt his eyes. A perfectly mature female nude was reclining on a slab of stone, with a splendid example of the male genitals peeking out from between her thighs. Some things are just wild to read sometimes. But apparently it's important to the story. "Can you see anything?" asked Ryuji. The beam of their flashlight showed that the water had collected at the bottom of the well, about 4 or 5 meters down, but they didn't know how deep the water was. "There's water down there." Ryuji scuffled around, tying the end of the rope to a post. "Okay, point your flashlight downward and hold it over the edge. Don't drop it, whatever you do." He's planning on going down in there. As he realized this, Asakawa's legs began to shake. What if I have to go down? Now, finally, with a narrow vertical tunnel staring him in the face, Asakawa's imagination started to work on him. "I can't do it. Go into the black water and do what? Fish around for bones? That's what? There's no way I can do that. I'll go crazy." As he gradually watched Ryuji lower himself into the hold, he prayed to God that his turn would never come. His eyes were accustomed to the dark now, and he could see the moss covering the inner surface of the well. The stones of the wall and an orange beam of his flashlight seemed to turn into eyes, and noses and mouths. And when he couldn't tear his gaze away, patterns on the stones transformed to dead faces, distorted with demonic cries at their moment of death. Innumerable evil spirits undulated like seaweed, hands outstretched toward the exit. He couldn't drive away the image. A pebble fell into the ghastly shaft, barely a meter across, echoing across the sides of the well, as he swallowed into the gullets of the evil spirits. Whoa! Ryuji wormed his body into the space between the top of the well and the floorboards, wrapped the rope around his hands, and slowly let himself down. Soon he was standing at the bottom. His legs were submerged up to his knees. It wasn't very deep. "Hey, Asakawa, go get the bucket. Oh, and the thin rope, too." The bucket was where they'd left it, on the balcony. Asakawa crawled out from underneath the cabin. It was dark outside, but it was still far brighter than under the foundation. What a feeling of release. So much pure air. He looked around the cabin. Only A1 by the road emitted any light. He made a point not looking at his watch. The warm, friendly voices spilling from 1A seemed to constitute a separate world, floating in the distance. They were the sound of dinner time. He didn't have to look at his watch to know what time it must be. He returned to the lip of the well, retied the bucket and shovel to the end of the rope, and lowered them down. Ryuji shoveled earth from the bottom of the well into the bucket. From time to time, he'd crouch and run his fingers along the mud, searching for something, but he didn't find anything. "Haul the bucket up!" he shouted, with his belly braced against the edge of the wall. Asakawa pulled up the bucket and then dumped the mud and rocks into the ground before lowering the empty bucket back down into the well. It seemed that quite a bit of dirt and sand had drifted into the well before it had been sealed. Ryuji dug and dug, but without turning up Sadako's beautiful limbs. "Hey, Asakawa!" Ryuji paused in his labors, looking up. Asakawa didn't reply. "Asakawa! Something wrong up there?" Asakawa wanted to reply. "Nothing's wrong, I'm fine." "You haven't said a word this whole time. At least, call out encouragement or something. I'm getting a bit melancholy down here." "Well then, how about a song? Something by Hibari Misora, maybe." I recognize that name. I'm fine," he managed to mutter. "You're a pain in the ass, that's what you are." Ryuji spat out the words and jammed the tip of the shovel into the water. How many times had he done this now? The water level was slowly dropping, but still there was no signs of what they were looking for. He could see the bucket climbing more and more slowly, and finally it stopped. Asakawa let it slip out of his hands. He had it raised about half of the head of the well, and now it plunged back down again. Ryuji managed to avoid a direct hit, but he got splashed to the head with muddy water. Along with anger came the realization that Asakawa was at the limit of his strength. "Son of a bitch, are you trying to kill me?" Ryuji climbed up the rope. "Your turn." "My turn?" "No, well, buddy." Shocked, Asakawa stood up, banging his head hard on the floorboards in the process. "Wait, Ryuji. It's okay, I'm alright. I've still got some strength left." Asakawa stammered. Ryuji poked his head out of the well. "No, you haven't. Not an ounce. Your turn." Just hold on. Let me catch my second wind. We'd be here until dawn." Ryuji shined a light on Asakawa's face. There was a strange look in his eyes. Fear of death had stolen his reason. One look told Ryuji that Asakawa was no longer capable of rational judgment. "Oh!" Between shoveling muddy water into a bucket and hauling that bucket 4 or 5 meters straight up, it didn't take much to see which was the harder job. "Down you go." Ryuji pushed Asakawa toward the well. "No, wait. What? I'm claustrophobic." "Don't be silly." Asakawa continued to cringe, unmoving. The water at the bottom of the well trembled slightly. "I can't do it. I can't go down there." Ryuji grabbed Asakawa by the collar, slapped him twice. "Snap out of it. I can't go down there. You've got death staring you in the face and you might be able to do something about it. And now you're saying you can't? Don't be a worm. It's not just your own life at stake here, Remember the phone call? You ready to take sweet babykins down into the darkness with you?" "Oh, bringing up his child." I mean, valid? I still hate him, though. Like, I genuinely still hate him. He thought about his wife and daughter. He couldn't afford to be a coward. He held their lives in his hands, but his body wouldn't obey him. Is this really going to work, though? But there was no purpose in his voice. He knew it was pointless to even ask the question. Ryuji relaxed his grip on his collar. "Shall I tell you a little more about Professor Miyoto's theory? There are 3 conditions that you have to meet in order for a malevolent will to remain in the world after death. An enclosed space, water, and a slow death. 1, 2, 3. In other words, if someone dies slowly in an enclosed space with water present, then usually that person's angry spirit will haunt the place. Now look at this well. It's a small enclosed space. There's water, and remember what the old lady in the video said? How has your health been since then? If you spend all your time playing in the water, monsters are bound to get you." Playing in the water. That was it. Sadako was down there under the black muddy water playing, even now, an endless, watery underground game. You see, Sadako was still alive when she was dropped into this well, and while she waited for death, she coated the very walls with her hatred. All three conditions were met in her case. So according to Professor Miura, it's easy to exorcise such a curse. We just free her. We take her bones out of this nasty old well, have a nice memorial service, and lay her to rest in the soil of her native place. We bring her up in the wide, bright world. I don't know.
I don't know. It seems like kind of. I don't know. I don't. I don't know. She's just. I don't know. It feels like that's not enough.
A while before, when he'd crawled out under the cabin. Oh yeah, I think we're gonna.
We might finish it tonight, or I might not. Honestly, I'm also getting tired as well. So I think after this little tidbit, I'm probably gonna call it a night. But oh my god.
The cabin to get the bucket. Asakawa had felt an indescribable sense of liberation. Were you supposed to provide Sadako with the same thing? What was that she wanted? So that's the charm? Maybe it is, and maybe it isn't.
Fair enough.
That's pretty vague. Ryuji grabbed Asakawa's collar again. Think! There's nothing certain in our future. All we can hope is for a vague future. But in spite of that, you're going to keep on living. You can't give up on life just because it's vague. It's a question of possibilities. The charm, there might be a lot of other things Sadako wants, but there's a good possibility that taking her remains out of here will break the curse of the video. It's a possibility. Asakawa twisted his face and screamed silently. Enclosed space, water, and slow death, he says. Those three conditions allow the strongest survival of an evil spirit, he says. Where's the proof that anything that fraud Miura has said is true? If you understand me, you'll go down in that well. But I don't understand. How can I understand something like this? You don't have time to dawdle. Your deadline is almost here. Ryuji's voice grew gradually kinder. Don't think you can overcome death without a fight. Asshole, I don't want to hear your philosophy of life. But he finally began to climb over the rim of the well. Attaboy, you finally think you can do it? Asakawa clung to the rope and lowered himself onto the inner wall of the well. Ryuji's face was before his eyes. Don't worry, there's nothing down there. Your biggest enemy is your imagination.
You sure about that?
When he looked up, the beam of the flashlight hit him full in the face, blinding him. He pressed back against the wall. His grip on the rope began to loosen. His feet slipped against the stone and suddenly dropped about a meter. His hands burned with friction. He was dangling just above the surface of the water. He couldn't make himself let go. He extended one foot, putting it in the water up to his ankle, as if he were testing the temperature of the bath. With a cold touch of the water came goose flesh from the tips of his toes to his spine. He immediately retracted his foot, but his arms were too tired to keep hanging onto the rope. His weight pulled him down slowly, and eventually he couldn't endure anymore, so he planted both feet. Immediately, the soft dirt below the water enveloped his feet, submerging them. Asakawa still clung to the rope in front of his eyes. He started to panic. He felt as if a forest of hands were reaching up from the earth to pull him into the mud. The walls were closing in on all sides, leering at him. There's no escape. Ryuji! He tried to scream, but he couldn't find his voice. He couldn't breathe. Only a faint dry sound escaped his throat, and he looked on board like a drowning child. He felt something warm trickle down the side of his thigh.
Oh shit, he pissed himself.
Asakawa, breathe. Overcome by the pressure, Asakawa had forgotten to breathe. It's alright, I'm here. Ryuji's voice echoed down to him, and Asakawa managed to suck in a lungful of air. He couldn't control the pounding of his heart. He couldn't do what he needed to do down here. He desperately tried to think of something else, something more pleasant. If this well had been outside under a sky full of stars, it wouldn't be this horrible. It was because it was covered by cabin B4 that it was so hard to take. It cut off the escape route. Even with the concrete lid gone, there were only floorboards and spiderwebs above. Sadako Yamamura has lived down here for 25 years. That's right, she's down here, right under my feet. This is a tomb. That's what it is. A tomb. He couldn't think of anything else. Though itself was closed, thought itself was closed off to him, as was any kind of escape. Sadako had tragically ended her life down here, and the scene that had flashed through her mind at the moment of death and remained here still strong through the power of her psyche. And they'd matured down here in the cramped hole, breathing like the ebb and flow of the tide, waxing and waning in strength according to some cycle that at some point coincided in frequency with a television placed directly overhead. And then they'd make their appearance in the world. Sadako was breathing. From out of nowhere, the sound of breathing enclosed him. Sadako Yamamura. Sadako Yamamura. The syllables repeated themselves in his brain, and her terrifying beautiful face came to him out of the photographs, shaking her head coquettishly. Sadako Yamamura was here. Asakawa recklessly began to dig through the earth beneath him, searching for her. He thought of her pretty face and her body, trying to maintain the image. That beautiful girl's bones covered him like this.
I shouldn't be laughing at that. Poor guy.
Asakawa moved the shovel, sifting through the mud. Time no longer mattered. He'd taken off his watch before coming down here. Extremely fatigued and stress had deadened his vexation. He forgot the time limit he was laboring under. It felt like being drunk. He had no sense of time. Only by the number of times the buckets came down the well to him, and by the beating of his heart, did he have any way of measuring time. Finally, Asakawa grasped a large round rock with both hands. It was smooth and pleasant to the touch, with 2 holes in its surface. He lifted it out of the water. He washed the dirt off out of its recesses. He picked it up that what must have been ear holes and found himself face to face with a skull. His imagination clothed in flesh. Big clear eyes returning to the deep hollow sockets of flesh appeared above the 2 holes in the middle, forming itself into a delicate nose. Her long hair was wet and water dripped from her neck and from behind her ears. Sadako Yamamura blinked her melancholy eyes 2 or 3 times to shake the water from her eyelashes. Squeezed between Asakawa's hands, her face looked painfully distorted. But still, her beauty was unclouded. She smiled at Asakawa, then narrowed her eyes as if to focus her vision. I've been wanting to meet you. As he thought this, Asakawa slumped down right where he was. He could hear Ryuji's voice from far overhead. Asakawa, was it your deadline 10:04? Rejoice! It's 10:10! Asakawa, can you hear me? You're still alive, right? The curse is broken. We're saved. Hey, Asakawa! If you die down there, you'll end up like her. If you die, just don't put a curse on me. Okay? If you're going to die, die nice, would you? Hey, Asakawa! If you're alive, answer me, damn it! He heard Ryuji, but he didn't really feel saved. He just curled up as if in a dream, as if in another world, clutching Sadako's Yamamoto skull to his chest.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I'm finishing this bitch tomorrow. Woo, man. Ooh. Oh. Okay. Wow. Yeah, this is gonna be the tiny segment. Yeah, I'm gonna finish this tomorrow because it's like a little. Hold on, let me see how many like pages. Okay, yeah, it is a fairly small chapter. It's very small. It's fairly small. Yo, that was, ooh, I love, that's wild. Oh my god. Honestly, if they did this, a little bit of a rant, if they did the book rather than make their own franchise of said book, I honestly enjoy the book more than what they have going on. It gives depth. And honestly, yeah. It's actually much more interesting than the actual. I don't think there's like much to the movies besides. I think I guess they were trying to do the same thing that the book was. I guess they kind of kept track with trying to break the curse as well, probably. I don't even know. Like I said, I don't really watch scary movies. I don't watch horror movies in general, but I love horror novels. Yes, I know. Really fucking weird. But I'm invested. But I'm probably, yeah, honestly, depending, I'm actually, I think if I do it again tomorrow, oh shit. That's my knuckle. Yeah, I'm probably, okay, so, no one, hold on. Let's flip a coin. Let's flip a coin. Okay, best 3 out of 5. Heads. I do the second book tomorrow. Tails. I do another book. Okay. Okay, tails. Heads, okay. Tails. Heads, oh my god, okay. So 2 heads and 2 tails. So this is the deciding factor. We're starting the second book tomorrow. After I finish reading this one. Actually, that sounds actually really fun. Alright. So, that was actually really fun. And holy shit. I cannot wait to finish it, and I can't wait to read the second book. Alright. Is there anybody online? That's a real question. Not many people. Okay. So All right. So, I hope you all enjoyed your time here. And seeing me crash the fuck out over like information that I never knew I needed. So, have a good night, or a good evening, or whenever you're watching this. And I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.